that would be great. There you go. So you can consent by pressing the continue button. If we can all keep ourselves on mute, that will help us just manage the sound. And I think that in the, I never know where it is, but you can raise your hand, I think, in the participant. I don't know, where do you raise your hand, Thabo?
It should be right at the bottom, either on reactions or under the where the participants are. You can click on more and raise your hand there.
Yeah. Okay, so under participants, you can raise your hand. If that is still difficult, then put your video on and wave your hand like that, and hopefully we'll see you and we'll be able to acknowledge you. All right, and give you the platform to speak. You're more than welcome as well to post any comments or questions in the chat group, and Thabo and Zanele will monitor that as well. So let's go right ahead. I'm not going to ask everyone to introduce yourselves. You're more than welcome to introduce yourself in the chat group as well. All right. So let's continue immediately, if that's okay. So you're all welcome, and I hope that you are warm wherever you are and that you are safe. I'm going to introduce and facilitate the session. Ubumbano, which is a relatively new organization, is about facilitating space for reflection and learning from our social justice practice, right? And we do this, and we have been doing this for the last few years, by convening solidarity hubs that deliberately and consciously foreground the voice of those who are resisting and who are in struggle against oppression in any form. Out of that, when we listen intently to the lived experience of those who are at the cutting edge of struggle, Ubumbano, we then try and facilitate connection and support solidarity action that might emerge from that. Unfortunately, with COVID, we've been unable to convene these hubs. Where in person, we are able to connect and build a sense of connection amongst people, right? So we've been using these online versions, which is nice because we get to see people we otherwise might not have seen or heard from. But it does mean that we've got to interact in a different way. But we hope that this kind of space does allow us at least to keep in touch with each other in some form or the other. So today, this is a solidarity hub which has emerged because we haven't been speaking about recent events, particularly in South Africa, right? So what are we trying to do with this hub? There's three main objectives to this hub. The first is we're trying to listen to different voices. I have no doubt you are completely bombarded with all these theories of coup d'etats and insurrections, and what did the defense minister say, and what did the president say, and what must the ANC do, and all these analyses that people are doing. There's very little of the voice of those who are involved in those struggles with the communities who are most affected. All right, so we're trying to create a space for those voices, your voices, to be present. And in the 40-odd people who have registered for this solidarity hub, it's a wide range of people. There's church leaders, people from faith organizations, there's people from community-based organizations, there's activists, young activists, the ones who are often in the forefront of throwing stones against the police. We've got NGO leaders. So it's a wide variety of organizations, people from Europe as well, people from throughout the country and the region. So we're trying to hear those voices. You have to speak. This isn't a seminar. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue, right? The second objective of this hub is that we want to try and do some contextual analysis. One of the eternal problems of us in the social justice sector is we externalize cause and effect. So in all the analysis that you're listening to on TV, in the newspapers and radio, all of that is saying, what must the ANC do? What must the government do? Right? There's very little analysis that locates us as social justice actors. within the context that we are analyzing. So what we want to try and do today is to locate ourselves. We can't see ourselves as objective observers standing afar. We have to see ourselves as part of the situation that we're trying to understand, right? So that we can be empowered to act and not just ask other people to fix the problem. And the third reason for this, and the final reason, is that if out of this reflection, we start identifying opportunities for collaboration, then we must explore that, right? Are we being challenged to engage in a different way in our communities, right? From this reflection on what has happened. In preparing for this, there were two things that struck me. The one was that for many people, they're calling this a kairos moment. And in theological terms, it's a moment of truth where we can decide to correct our course or perish. And someone put it that the kairos moment is when desperation and courage collide. I think this may well be our kairos moment. And I was struck as well by a statement by Abashali Bashimchondolo on the 13th of July, where they said, the elites have always ignored the poor. They do not see us. When the riots happened, suddenly the poor were before their eyes. But the poor will remain poor even after the riots. So I think I think Abashali's statement captures a lot the dislocation and the absence of the voice of those who are involved in the discussions about how we go forward. So to help us with this reflection, I've asked David Mtseng to lead us with a short provocation, if you want. David has been a long-time collaborator with Act Ubumbano, and he works for the Church Land Program, which is based in Pietermaritzburg. But David, you are in Durban, right? You live in Durban, and the Church Land Program with David and his colleagues have actually been a midwife to Act Ubumbano in many ways. They've been acting as the fiscal host as we establish ourselves as an organization. So we've asked David just to, based on his experience of working in the area of in KZN, but also as a social justice actor and an activist and an accompanier of community struggles, just to share some perspectives and some insights that will prompt a conversation. Right? So not for long, well, basically I'm hoping that he's able to prompt us into a conversation. This isn't a seminar. We want to hear the analyses and the experiences of yourselves. So we will have a conversation for the next hour and 15 minutes, rather than have a question and answer session. So I'm going to give David the floor and ask him just to lead us off. And then we'll take the conversation up as it emerges. David? You have to unmute yourself, comrade.
Yes, thanks, Ashley, for the opportunity. Greetings to every comrade who is part of the discussion today. I hope I will do justice to the brief, but that is just to be part of a conversation. I mean, to say I will lead the conversation, I'm sure it's just Ashley being modest. I'm a participant in the conversation, because also I haven't made much sense of what we've seen in the last 2 weeks. We know that KZN and Gauteng were badly hit or hard hit by the events that took place in the past 2 weeks. Just as a reminder, I thought maybe one needs to go back a little bit and look at how we ended up on the events that started on Saturday, the 10th, and Sunday the 11th, and gaining momentum from Monday the 12th onwards. But just to go back a bit, so, and most of what I will share is what I've seen in this province and what I came across either through networks and WhatsApp groups that I'm part of. And then, of course, people in their own experiences and in their own localities will also share what they've seen, what they've heard, and how it affected them, you know, because we are in a conversation. So I want to start off by just saying that all this happens when we are on level 4 lockdown, where we're not supposed to have political gatherings or social gatherings, and other substances are barred from sales and things like that. So people can't go to church, and only funerals limited to 50 and so on and so on. We know what level 4 entails. And then also, I just want to remind us that often when we are in these stricter lockdowns levels, we rely mostly on social network, WhatsApp, Zoom, and so forth, which is what we are doing today. And so the events that we saw in the past 2 weeks actually were largely organized through WhatsApp voice notes. I mean, we will remember when this cluster, security cluster minister saying this is a faceless instigators and whatnot, because most of what we saw was largely organized through social network, WhatsApp voice notes, that you can only hear voices, you don't know where they come from. It's either male voices or female voices, but you don't know who actually are behind the voices. So it starts when the rumors gained momentum that after the judgment of Concord, Zuma will indeed have to spend 15 months in prison. So voice notes started circulating, and we saw a visibility of MKVA members around the homestead of former president and other supporters. A campaign, Hands Off Zuma, began, and it gained momentum. I'll use that as well. Also fueled by these voice notes. Some people using their YouTube accounts to spread the message, Hands Off Zuma. And up until we saw that press briefing on Saturday, where Kalni House and other senior ANC members made, I think, quite strong comments and use quite heavy words, you know, committing to not going to allow President or former President Zuma to be arrested, and they said a lot. Already, again, that was, you know, we could see in that press briefing that there were thousands already around them. Well, maybe 1,000, not thousands. But that rally, I will call it, or mini rally, that's where we saw that people really already are buying into this Hands Off Zuma campaign, with a lot of people attending. obviously we heard that they were by far, I mean, overwhelming the police in that area, and we could see police really, they were outnumbered. So again, the tone there was no one is going to prison and it can never happen, and so forth and so on. Many cars were from our city, Durban, moving all the way towards Ngandla. So again, I started by saying this was lockdown level 4. So we could see how people would easily, you know, break away from what is meant to be the order of the day, you know, to pursue this campaign, hands off Zuma. Deadline came of the Tuesday, and obviously he went to prison, and that's when we started seeing real flames now, with trucks being torched at Moy River, and also other routes like from N2 towards Richards Bay. Those routes were blockaded, and again more trucks torched. And I know that in Guamashu, for example, where I live, that's when they started attacking ShopRite on Saturday already. ShopRite was attacked on that very Saturday, the weekend of the Tuesday when Zuma had presented himself. And then it started there to really, you know, become what we saw. Sunday, they attacked Spa and the whole shopping complex that is in Guamachu, and the nearby shopping complexes, Bridge City, and so forth. And already we could see that other centers were already in flames. But I want to say that there were more voice notes. This time, they are no longer saying hands off Zuma. They are beginning to say hashtag shutdown SA, hashtag shutdown SA. And more and more and more and more, we saw other warehouses being burnt down here in KZN, storage facilities, and obviously pretty close. We ran out of petrol because our refinery couldn't continue to operate. They had to temporarily shut down. We ran out of petrol, ran out of things such as bread. You couldn't go to shops because there are no shops. Tuck shops could not handle the volume of demand, people wanting things they even not sell because they can only be found at these big retail shops. But the KZN, I think, so also another side of the shutdown SA, or the effects of the shutdown SA, which was unprecedented, and no one actually saw it coming, except of course for those who were in the forefront maybe of organizing these things. Here I want to specifically refer to what now we know is in the public, the killing of young men from surrounding areas of Phoenix. This is Bambai, Amaoti, Inanda, Zwelisha, Kwamashu, Duzuma, on the highway, Phoenix Highway. It's a main road in Phoenix, the one that cuts through the location, Phoenix. Their cars bent, their bodies, some were mutilated and bent, others shot, and even today, calls are being made for people to come and identify bodies, or those who have their members missing to come and check if they aren't part of what took place in Phoenix. it has caused an uproar here in Durban. It has shaken, I think, most areas, and including hostels. Some of us who lived around the height of unrest in the mid 80s, we know what activists or people who live in hostels were capable for. So, and they wanted to take this on because they said it's not just part of the unrest. This is criminal activities. This is ruthless murders, and names are given to try to clarify what's happening. I want to say that in all this, most of us were alarmed by not seeing police in their numbers. Even from the very beginning, when I started, I said, people who were saying hands off Zuma overwhelmed police just by numbers. Up until these past 2 weeks, we could see there is no much movement of police, and that was troubling. Of course, explanations are now given, and I want to go back to what Ashley was saying, that there are a number of theories: insurrection, a coup, failed coup, whatever names are to be given to what we saw. But in reality, we did not see law enforcement taking their role seriously, either in capping or limiting the extent of damage that was done to property, the extent to which looting took place. They were so invisible. Of course, now they are visible. I mean, the deployment of 2,500 military officers, I don't know what was behind that as a rationale. And later we are told, no, there'll be 25,000 or so. And we see them, they are busy now collecting goods, and there are questions about where these goods are going. Here's the problem. For us who live in the township, who work with people in informal settlements and in other rural areas, we have from last year appreciated the way we have used social network to organize and mobilize so that people continue to seek ways to emancipate themselves. What we saw recently was almost a slap in the face, where what we thought is a useful and glorious tool can be subverted and used to do something to this magnitude. Why I say this is a problem? Because already then we had the security cluster, the state security agency saying from now on they will monitor and track the use of these tools, social network, which means as activists now we will have our hands tied behind. Or even when we organize for our own struggles, if it is seen to be in any way against the state, it will fall under the category, because we don't know what leads to something to be seen as an act of terrorism or an act of insurgency and or insurrection and an attempt to because the work that we do, at no point will it cushion the demands of the poor or make as if it's a plea that sounds like we are begging the state, please give us our land, please make our houses available. Comrades, they are in their struggle. are so, elevated to push in a way that they see necessary at a time they see necessary. So protests, arranging of protests, preparing and organizing protests under the circumstances, I think it is not going to be an affair that we used to see. It's going to change. The dynamics are going to change. Just in the midst of what we saw last week, one of the Sheikh settlement that we work with in Brighton, it's called Brighton settlement, was had fire, and all units were burnt to ashes. Now the difficulty is shops, hardwares, warehouses have been attacked. There is nothing to get in order to allow comrades to rebuild their homes. Some comrades from other settlements tried to bring a tent at least for shelter. They couldn't because somewhere in Gamash there were now roadblocks. If you leave the north of Durban to get towards town, there were already roadblocks in the vicinity of Avoka. You're traveling on a bakkie, you are carrying something like a tent, you are a prime suspect. They had to turn back. They couldn't deliver the tent. They were running short of petrol. In any event, I myself couldn't get to the settlement because I had almost less than a quarter. I think it was saying I can only travel about 10 kilometers. And to get to the settlement and back, you need more gas to do that. So I couldn't even go. What one relied on was telephones. And it was so difficult because, at night it is cold these days in Durban. And up until somehow, because others, people were able to move around. So Doctors Without Borders came and donated a tent. Some Muslim families came and provided food. But the demand is still there. You cannot bring clothes, and you have to think twice before you move between Pietermaritzburg and Durban. So moving away from all what I've said, I just want to look at maybe the question that will be useful for our discussion. What do we make of all this now as this group? You will have your own points, but the ones that I put down that I thought are useful to look at is that social network remains a powerful mobilizing tool that we've seen and that we need to acknowledge. And as these kinds of activists, I think we need to reclaim the useful part of social network as a tool. And we need to reclaim the, not secrecy, but we need to reclaim it as our space that should not be interfered with by the state. We have a right to this tool in a way that protects and support our struggles without worrying about what the state is going to do. I think also what we saw last week is saying something about the nature of our societies, particularly the vulnerable groups, that they are quick to act when something affects them directly. I don't know what was behind the looting, the carrying of so many kgs of flour or milli-meal or rice. It got scary when you see even people carrying the TVs, the what's. What is happening here? Because we are going to see more in-depth hunger, people getting into more, difficulties with jobs, losses, and so forth. If someone You know, these organizers, it's troubling because I said it's faceless voice notes, you know, and threatening people that there will be no water, will shut down water supply, will cut electricity, go to shops, buy what you need, or now go to shops, take what you need. People will get what you call this panic, and they started running around, really throwing themselves in lion's den, shooting themselves on the foot because now they are struggling. Next week here in Durban, I'm sure in other areas, it would normally be social grants payout. So people would use ShopRite, Spar, Boxer, and all these big retailers, a post office. We are so concerned because we know there is not gonna be any way easy to access these social grants because all these shops are gone, and it's really going to be difficult for many families. So the other one, I say, politicians have lost credibility. We know this when we look at how the narrative is going within the ruling party, that it's in disarray. They can't agree on even how to classify what we saw, you know, not just the ministers, even other members. They can't agree on how to make sense or how to talk about what we saw, starting from the very early you know, incidences where I mentioned the press briefings and the rallies, where you could see, you know, that the ruling party is too factionalized, that it has rendered the country in the biggest mess you can imagine. Here's the difficulty, which is my ending point. No one knows when is the next round of what we saw last 2 weeks. We can't say it's contained, it's not going to happen. We don't know if it ended, and we don't know if there is next round coming. But voice notes keep coming. They keep coming, flocking the public, again threatening or about the termination of services. Just now, we are told this morning that yesterday municipal workers from Black communities have said they are not going to work with their Indian counterparts in response to what happened in Phoenix. So that will tell you a lot about the rendering of services when not just the ruling party is in disarray, but even institutions in our society are increasingly becoming fragmented. So maybe let me pause there and okay, allow others to share their ideas and maybe comments and questions where it's possible. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, David. I think it's a useful starting point. I want to ask one question, David, before opening it up to everybody else, because I think it would be good to get a sense as well from a Gauteng perspective and some of the experiences, particularly in Soweto and Alex, if people have been involved or close to those struggles as well. But the one question that has emerged is the issue of community organizing, right? Or community consciousness. So the fact that people were able to be mobilized so effectively to go and loot. It for me, one of it challenges the extent to which we understand, or the extent to which our community work has actually taken root in communities. Maybe some reflections on that. It seems whatever work we've been doing for the last 20 years within communities just went up in smoke, because there clearly was no political consciousness, if you want. I'm not sure. But your reflections on that, and then we'll open it up for conversation.
Yeah, I think the question you are asking is closer to the point I made about our society acting quickly, because when they feel threatened, that they might run out of essentials. Here is the opportunity. Here is the opportunity. If you don't go, don't blame anyone when you don't have anything. So it's like, because of knowing how vulnerable and our society is, and the level of poverty that is affecting our society, organizers of these looting incidents knew they are playing at a groundswell, field. The field was ready. The field was ready for bringing in this concept that this is the time to go and get what you want anywhere without fear, and do that in numbers, because there was a popular terms they were using as send off, as send off points, to make people just run wild and storm into shops and then take whatever they want. They knew they couldn't send people who are not as vulnerable as communities we saw moving into the shops, and some of them getting killed in the process, So I think poverty has played its role, or being in the state of abject poverty has played a significant role. Yeah, and social network. We
Right.
Something about the social network that I think also becomes important in this whole thing. But they touch the nerve, of the vulnerable groups. They knew if they threaten them about what they need or lure them, it's either threaten or lure them with what they need the most, they will definitely jump at the opportunity. Yeah.
Thanks, David. Are there other reflections along these lines? I'm curious to know where, how your organization or the work that you are doing, or physically where you might be located. What were some of the thoughts and reflections you might have had during this time, whether it's be in Gauteng or in Durban? I see that people are commenting on the side as well in the chat group. Please carry on doing that. But I don't know if people want to maybe share some of their reflections from wherever they've been, those who are watching events in Gauteng.
There's two hands that went out.
Hands are up.
Okay. All right. I can't see hands. Whose hands are up?
Sbonelo, whose hand was up, and then followed by Tammy.
Sbonelo, then Tammy. Good stuff. How come I can't see the hands?
Now Abdia's hand is up as well. So I guess it'll be Sbonelo, Abdia, and then Tammy.
All right, cool. Sbonelo, go for it.
No, I don't know whether you can hear me. Am I audible enough?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
Yes, no, thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to quickly thank the Ubumbano family for allowing us such a very fruitful platform of engagement to engage on very key and important political issues which are transpiring in our country currently. My observation, particularly coming from the student union, dealing a lot with young people. Currently in our country, even before, the levels of inequality that exist in South Africa are too much and they are unsustainable. So the levels of poverty, because some of us, when we speak about poverty, it's something that when we interact with our people in our communities, It's something that we see on a daily basis and we're subjected to on a daily basis. It's not something that we read about from some sectors of media or wherever. So a person who is hungry, you can't talk about ethics and principles to a hungry person. Hunger is depriving people of engaging in critical thinking, because the one that is of expediency is that they must feed themselves and they must also feed their families. So we must be honest with ourselves as activists. The government must be honest and fair to the people. You see the issues, the events that were transpiring, the lootings and everything, they were not so much Zuma motivated or anything. The Zuma issue added and motivated an already precipitated situation which was getting out of hand. Because, for instance, apart from the criminal elements which had hijacked the entire struggle, let us first look and diagnose properly. The people were there, most of them. They took food. They went to stores and they took food. So, and when they take food, you can see that most of them, they come from homes where there is not even a meal to serve the entire family. So I'm saying that the government has failed on a continuous basis to provide for the people. And I also feel that we as civil society and as non-profit organizations in our communities, we have failed a great deal in taking the government to task, because it is our primary duty as organizations which exist in societies not to be soft on government. We are becoming more and more soft. We no longer know how to touch the nerve of government because the government is sleeping, and it has shown that in South Africa, we have no law enforcement agencies. In South Africa, we have no regulations which are in place to support, to protect our local businesses. So I wouldn't blame the citizens per se, but I'm putting this blame directly on government, because these people have proven time and time again that when they ascend to power, they become asleep and they don't do what is required of them. So I'm saying, as my parting shot, as I'm concluding, it is very important of us as citizens and also as organizations that exist in our societies to advocate for change, because what we have seen in the past week is much more smaller and minimal compared to what we're going to see in the years that are going to come. Remember that in South Africa, as years go by, the issue of unemployment and inequality, it exacerbates and aggravates itself more further than before. Because if you were to take South Africa 10 years from now, we were not like this, even if you look at the figures. But now we have exacerbated much more further. And any country that sustains itself through inequality and high levels of unemployment is a country which is teetering at a brink of a civil war and citizens fighting amongst each other. As the so-called saying or phrase say, in the land of the hungry man, a rich man sleeps with one eye open. So that is what we're going to see in this country. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Bonelo. Thank you very much. Tammy, you're next on the list.
Hi, everyone.
Tammy, sorry, Bonelo, where are you based? Just tell us where you're from, so that we have an idea.
Yes, I'm from KZN, Pietermaritzburg, to be precise.
All right, sure. Tammy.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm Tammy from Soweto. I'm staying in Bramfisherville. Maybe before I can even say something in this regard, I would ask the question to say, do we have intelligence in this country? It is part of the law enforcement. Because if we do, remember, I'm a product of 1976. In 1976, we wouldn't have had anything that you do and then you not being caught. you will be followed by the police in the next minute. So my point is, yes, of course, the whole incident was police were overwhelmed by the communities, but is it really fair to our communities? It's not fair. So in whatever that has happened, I agree that we have failed our communities. And also in our young people who took part in that situation, is that do we really need to have to mobilize people to destroy what we have because we want what we don't have? It is one of the things that will take us 10 steps back from where we are. So it is a whole lot of questions that are just building up from the discussion and from the frustrations that we had during the past 2 weeks. And then my contribution to that is that maybe what we need to do as community leaders or community activists to teach our people to protect what they have and not to destroy what we have because you're looking for what you don't have, and build up. And then in the country like South Africa, whereby there is a whole lot of unemployment and poverty, you'll find people not having, roaming around the streets, not having something to do. That is where you'll find people are easily to be grouped up and do things that are out of hand. So maybe then what we need to do as Ubumbano, we need to go back and reflect and sit down and come up with something that will assist our communities to make sure that we conscientize them about what has happened in the few weeks, and then maybe to try to motivate them not to repeat. As we said, we don't know when it's going to come back again. We don't know whether it's finished or it's still brewing wherever it is, because we don't know where it started also. So I'm not sure of how best are we going to do it, or how best are we going to maneuver as Ubumbano to make sure that we get to the bottom of it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. All right, we'll take the other questions. Please feel free to pick up on anything that has been said, right? And you can respond to it as well. So the next person on my list is Abdia.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ashley. And also I'd like to thank the speakers before me. If I may, I'd like to just share, the experiences that I had last week when all of this happened. I think the speaker have put in context the social media. So if you would allow me just to give me a few minutes to gather my thoughts, Ashley, and if I go on too long, please stop me. So, I think we always remember the times where we were at a time when things really happened, where there was a bad experience. So here in Gauteng, I was basically at a station where I was working, doing COVID testing and vaccinations. And this was about 12 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I can't quite remember. But all of a sudden, social media seemed to have gone crazy with messages coming in. The first message I got was from my family. Now, I'm in Gauteng. Some of my family is in KZN, right? Basically, what happened was, so just to put in context again, the impact the social media had. I received messages that were so frightening about the Indian community being targeted and the looting. And now remember, I'm at a workstation. I'm trying to concentrate on work, but obviously all of this has an emotional impact and an emotional effect on all of us, right? So I decided at that point that I was going to leave work because I felt unsafe, right? Because I was still in Gauteng, but now this is all in the mind. I couldn't do things physically because I'm at work. But my point in saying this is that, okay, the calls I got was that our family business, my husband's family business in Chalkerskraal was totally looted. They were being locked up. They were terrified. But I also realized at that point, my family, my husband's family, was not the only people that was being affected. There was the whole of KZN, the pockets of it, where people were basically, I can't even begin to describe the words, the emotional impact of that. We were scared, we were frightened, we didn't know what to do. But not being able to be there physically, again, I think, to put in context social media, I came home. I decided at that point we were going to rally around with everyone who could organize the Zoom meeting and call for a prayer meeting, right? Instead of sending out all these horrific videos. Of course, the TV was there, we could see on TV. But I decided to rather, instead of using that social media platform for sending out these horrific messages and emails, we tried to, in a way, sit back and say, look, this is what we can do in our own homes now. I couldn't physically go out like so many of our comrades did and try and go deliver tents or do this, and yet they will also stop. So my point here is, we can only do what we can do under the circumstances. And I really feel for the people that was directly impacted. Sitting in Gauteng and sitting in a nice suburb, of course, you think, what more can I do? The only thing I could do at that point was to contact family and friends of the interfaith community and said, whether you Jewish or whether you Baha'i or whether you Muslim or whether you whatever Christian or whatever faith-based organization you come from, let's at least use the social media now and organize a prayer meeting for whatever, what we think it was worth, whether our prayers will be answered or not, but just to put out positive energy. That was the only thing I could at in my little space do at the time, because it was terrifying. It was really, I don't even have to repeat that. So I just wanted to share that with with the people that are on this platform today. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Abdi. I think you're based in the west of Joburg, right? So I think it's one of the things about South Africans is often the split personality where, I myself am a native of KwaZulu Natal, even though it's a little bit further north. But people migrate so often, so you always have some connection with your hometown. And when it starts going up in flames, how you respond becomes quite important as well. Kashifa, if you can unmute yourself and Kashifa, you might not. Can you hear me? Are you there still? That was the last hand that I had in this round of comments and questions. And Kashifa's vanished. Are you there? Tabo, can you see Kashifa anyway? She seems to have disappeared from my list of.
Yeah, she seems to have fallen off the call.
So,
but there's a few comments on the chat box.
Yeah.
I don't know if you
we'll
want
mention
to...
the comments now. Let's just take Fambai, and then we'll go to. Let's take Fambai as a hand, and then we'll look at some of the comments. Fambai.
Sure. Yes.
Just also say where you're from, where you're based, Fambai.
Yes, Fambai Grande from the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network. We're sitting in Zimbabwe. We're hosted by the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development. And comrades, we're glad that you're pointing out the underlying contradictions and the structural factors around this crisis. Obviously, as Southern Africa People Solidarity Network SAPSIM, we're interested in the broader regional impacts, in particular, on the one hand, the tribal dynamics of this, of course, the Black and Indian and conflicts that we're hearing. We know they're embedded in history, but also in class and so on. But we were hearing a lot that, there's potential of this situation triggering xenophobic violence against foreign nationals. So I just wanted to get some feedback from colleagues on that dimension, but also a sense of the broader regional impacts in terms of stability in the region, and also mindful of South Africa's own role as a regional leader in SADC. And well done, Ubumbano. This is a fantastic platform.
Great stuff. Thanks, Fambai. I see Kashifa is back. I'm going to give you a go again, Kashifa. And so Fambai has raised a couple of questions which we'll come back to, right? So none of these issues are lost. Kashifa? You see, Cape Town worries me now. What's happening with Cape Town?
No, it's even with the Zuma thing. There was no. Oh, I'm Kashifa from Cape Town. I was going to say Millie. I think with the Zuma thing, it started all there also. We've seen the gatherings, and under COVID, we're not supposed to do those gatherings. And it was allowed, and it was for a few days, those things have happened. So even when the attacks on these malls also happen, when people is hungry, they will go where they see opportunities there. But I don't believe that communities will burn down the malls like the way it was. They will grab whatever they can, whether it's even furniture or whatever the case may be, they will do that. But burning the structures like that, and I think it's elements of those ones who want to destroy this country. And I don't believe it's the poor. Even if you look at businesses, the way they operate, our people is hungry. The 350 has been taken away. So many people are struggling to get their social grants back, those who are on disability. And this government is taking their own time to assist our community instead of just continuing with these grants has been stopped. Now, where do people get money to continue buying food? And they don't give a discount on groceries. Even that money is not enough. That's why now when you look at businesses rich, now saying that how many organizations have come to businesses, come to government and ask for to assist, because people have lost their jobs. They don't have food. These organizations, they have these soup kitchens and assisting communities. They also run dry. But you don't see any of these ones. Yes, there's a few that assist, but most of them don't give. Now, this COVID and this incident has shown us, and I think we need to step back and see what is really happening. What I've seen is there's a lot of food, and I don't know why people don't have access to this food. And why is it forever a no to people when they are hungry? Why can't our food prices come down? If you even look at electricity, it's been up. We can't even afford to do that. And nobody seems to care. Now it's all about business. We need to fix and we need to put back. Yes, I don't think our community realize the impact of this thing. And the impact of this thing is they are the ones who are suffering. They are the ones who's losing out big time. And I think we need to look at these big elements of crooks who did all these things. Now, in Cape Town, we've seen also, and even in Joburg also, some of the areas where people are now guarding the mall also. Yes, I understand that it needs to happen also now that we are the poor are being criminalized and calling looters now also. So we see these ones as guarding now the mall. But being said that, our taxi violence is happening in Cape Town also. We don't see even businesses assisting our poor communities coming from the areas, going to the workplace, struggling to get transport. They don't put their hand in their pocket and say, hey, let's just try and help these ones to get home and safe and back to work. But our communities are doing the watching and these business and see that people is not looting there. So, you know, it should be a situation where we need to check now, why are people doing these things? Why are they not also looking at our communities and assisting our communities that is struggling, comrades? I want to pause there for now, but Steve also wants to add something because it was me. Is it okay, Com?
Mr. Makiko. Ooh, are you there? Stephen.
My observation on this, in fact, I was also thank Ubumbano for
Comrade, you're very
not
faint.
very
We can
well.
hardly
Not
hear you.
very well. Sorry, Stephen, we can barely hear you, my brother.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but I think if you can make your point quite concise, comrade, it will be helpful because this line is really bad.
Okay. Okay. What I've observed is that first there was a instruction that there should be no political violence, right? So that no meeting with political that will take place in the country because they didn't want to account. No, they don't want to be held accountable. No, and then after that, they started doing things of their own. That no, this dictatorship is happening currently in this government we are having is too much. Because even this thing of the arrest of Zuma, it was just their political, their political differences. That now it affected us a lot in the poor and take us. Now, this thing that now is been named as looting has been planned, well planned. Look how Zuma kept quiet about his arrest. Allowing them to be taken, offering to be taken to the police station on his own. He knew that this is going to happen. He knew that people there will be an action that will come after. So this thing that this candidate says that I think us as social movement, we have also faced because we've seen this that it is coming. We knew that this thing will happen, but we kept quiet. We didn't do anything because now that our people now are suffering, and I don't know if the media is also the government because apparently now they are able to name our struggle. Because you cannot keep quiet when there was a peaceful march in Durban against these are the protesters. It's their own struggle. It's not our struggle. It's their own struggle, but they're protesting. And the media kept quiet. The stuff is was instructed of ETV and SAP said they should not publish what is happening in Durban. And the social media did. We saw what's happening in Durban, and the media kept quiet. Now that our people now are start fighting for their own rights, are starting fighting, protesting for what is their own struggle is. They have been given a name. Right. I don't even think that they were even engaged. That what are you doing? But because of the poor and the working class, and again, I see that you are pushing me, but it's fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, comrade from Cape Town. I'm going to take the next 5 comments, right, and then try and summarize a little bit, and then we start looking for a wrapping up of proceedings. The first person on the list is Rose. Rose, can you unmute and go ahead?
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, everyone. I'm Rose from BioWatch. We environmental and social justice NGO, and we're based in Durban. I just really appreciated David's overview at the beginning. I think we're really grappling to understand and make sense of what feels very complex and full of contradictions. And the angle that I'll bring to this discussion is on food security and the challenges that it brings to us as an organization. We work a lot on food sovereignty and very poor communities in northern KwaZulu Natal. And during the past 2 weeks, these are the communities who've actually had food. So at the household level, they are saving seeds, they're producing food, and despite everything, they have food in the household. In the cities, it's been completely different, and one's faced now with contradictions. And for us as an organization, we're very critical of multinationals, of the corporatization of agriculture and the food system. So something like Checkers and ShopRite for us in many ways is a symbol of impoverishment and inequity. And yet we see that these are the very places where people will get social grants from. And if that's been burnt down, where will they get it from? So one sort of living with these contradictions, what does it mean for our work? What does it mean for food security in the country where we have food security as a country, but so many people are going hungry? I also just want to speak at a personal level as to what is triggered for each of us from last week. And for myself, what triggered me yesterday is that I was driving to work to Durban and I saw an army vehicle go by. And the contradiction for myself, where last week with the failure of the police to act, I wanted the army to come in. And yet I was one of people teaching in the 80s in Mbali outside Maritzburg, and I saw what the army did. I couldn't handle what the internal contradictions it put me in. That last week, what I was wanting, what I was thinking of myself in the 80s, and I'm finding at a personal level, it's very challenging and disturbing. Yeah, so those are my, I hope it's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You and me both on the deployment of the army. It just freaked me out. I remember the army in the 80s shooting people in Meadowlands and Orlando. The next person is Bulelani, but I see Bulelani has disappeared. Bulelani, are you around? Comrade, Bulelani.
He seems to have fallen off.
Sorry. When Bulelani comes back, we'll go to Bulelani. Daniela Kenrich, can you unmute and
Yebo, hi. Hi, Ashley. Greetings to everybody from Westville in Durban. I have found this an incredibly valuable space. Thank you. There have been so many spaces of discussion that haven't really kind of rooted the discussion in actual experiences, and the diversity here is wonderful. Thank you. Just a few points, some looking back, some looking forward. I'll try and be as quick as possible. Ashley, you know I talk too much. Just to say that I want to acknowledge Abdia and the pain that you've expressed, and also the pain other people have expressed, even if it hasn't been as overt, just in terms of how this has affected all of us in different ways. And I think one of the key things almost that unites people from all different backgrounds at this stage is the psychological impact of realizing that we are living in a failed state, that the normal securities that one expects are not there. And for me, that's been a very sobering realization that for people, shack dwellers and many other people, this has been an ongoing realization. And now I have begun to understand and have been able to feel much more in solidarity with those who have understood this failure for some time. And I've been part of a community in Westville where the local community has formed patrol groups and various forms of working together to protect supposedly what is ours, on the assumption that there's something that is ours and is not somebody else's, and somehow we have an entitlement to that others don't. and there were experiences even of Black people living in this community, which is predominantly and historically Indian, but quite mixed, where some of the patrollers actually blocked residents from this area because they were Black, and tried to prevent them from coming in, and assumed they were, in quotes, looters. It actually happened to my son and his friend who had got stuck in Musgrave. They could not get back here for 4 days, because every time they tried to move, 2 young Black men in a bit of a clapped out student car, there was no ways that they were going to get through. So that racial profiling, I think, was quite a reality. But on the positive side, since then, the Westville CPFs, Pinetown, Quadabeka, Claremont, some of the different areas have got together and have actually developed a statement in terms of a way forward together as communities. And one of the issues raised is the issue of racial profiling, as well as a commitment to working together to understand the different needs much more effectively. So I have found that quite a positive development. And another positive development that I have found is that, as we will speak out South Africa, we are part of a broader KZN Joint Churches initiative that was established under COVID-19. And the response led by KZNCC, the KZN branch of the SACC, and the KZN Church Leaders Group has been incredibly positive, particularly in responding to needs. One of the things, sorry, this is the last thing, just to say that one of the things that has really struck me, as I said earlier, in terms of the psychological impacts, and as we will speak out, we've put together a little leaflet, and thanks so much to ACT Ubumbano, who has contributed to us being able to print, it's like little bookmarks of a whole bunch of national and other emergency contact numbers, and the hope is that that some of the psychological impacts, and we've already had some people phoning even me around depression, suicidal thoughts, substance abuse, and so on. But also we are expecting increasing domestic violence and child abuse and so on, with the levels of desperation that people are expressing from all different social backgrounds. And so we've printed 16,000 of these little leaflets, and they are going out in every food parcel. One of those will go out, so that people also will be able to get a sense of not being completely isolated where they're at. And we've had requests for another 3,000. So there are these different ways that we've found to just do little bits and pieces. But the one last thing to say is, I think, as like in my community here, and the positive things around the different CPFs wanting to work together and so on, the challenge is how in our communities, and particularly for me as a Mlungu, as a middle-class person, what does it mean as an activist, a long-standing activist, to be part of these kinds of processes, and to shift the narrative out of just simply emergency food response for now, and security response for now, into saying, what are our responsibilities also as middle-class people, and can we hear what the needs actually are, and develop movements that work together to create some new forms of organizing. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Daniela. You did not speak for too long, which is, you and I have that running battle, but that's exactly the point. I like how you've ended with the forward-looking stance. I've got 2 more speakers. Jabulo, you can't put your hand down. In this place, once you put your hand up, you have to keep it up until you are recognized. But first, we're going to go to Nobuhle Zondi. If you can start Nobuhle, and then I'll try and bring us into Nobuhle, then Bulelani, then Jabulo. Right?
Sorry, comrade. There's a request or a question on the chat. Somebody, I think it's just relating to what Daniela just said. Claudia is asking,
No,
what
she just wants to know
organization
which
are you
of-
from?
Yeah.
Yeah. We will speak out South Africa.
Daniela's from- Yeah, you could just write that in the answer there, Tabo. Nobuhle, can you take the chair,
Yes.
take the seat, take the floor?
Okay, I would like to greet everyone. I would just want to put my point of view in all of this looting and stuff. I just feel like our government have just failed us. I think he knew what was going to happen if he took Zuma in and stuff. And I won't lie, I've been seeing everything that was happening, even while Zuma was still out. Most people were pushing their own agendas. People knew what they were doing, and now they want to blame people who not getting something from anywhere. They are the one who goes for looting and everything. Most people who were looting are those people who's got something, and our government has just failed us because he didn't even do anything to fight that looting. And now people have just looted and they are finished with that, and how he just brings soldiers and police. I don't understand how does he operate? I just feel he has just failed us. That's what I want to say. And here where I am, I'm in Pietermaritzburg at Imbali. And most people who are poor, they still got nothing. They still want food. And now prices in stores are up. They don't have money. And now they're just so scared. And those people who have money and everything, who's got cars, are those people who are busy looting. And our government knew that this will happen. And he just take all the powers to the police. He just told the police they mustn't do anything. And I mean, CPF, we couldn't do anything because we didn't have power to do that. And I can blame the government on that one. So I feel like our government have failed us. Thank you.
Thanks, Nobuhle. I think I'm hoping that in having these conversations and connections, we address exactly that feeling of despair and hopelessness that Nobuhle is so eloquently capturing. That if we take, in whatever form we can, we don't just say the ANC and the government have taken away our power. We can claim that power back. Right? So I want us to also start maybe thinking a little bit about how is it that we, as a network of community activists and organizations, can reclaim some of that power directly, right? And not just wait for government to do things. Bulelani, you have rejoined us. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened. Maybe what's that new spyware that was being used on Cyril Ramaphosa was also being used on you.
Yeah.
Do you want to comment?
Sure, thank you so much, and thank you for this conversation, and it's really needed. Well, my name is Bulelani Mzila, and I'm based in Pietermaritzburg in Mbali. I am a gender diversity political activist, advocating for LGBTIQ inclusive government programs and policy, as well as advocating for political parties to champion LGBTIQ issues. I think mine is actually on the lack of political leadership and generally just government leadership. If I remember very well, the week leading to the 12th, because everything in Pietermaritzburg started on the 12th. Itindale Mall, we woke up with Itindale Mall being burnt down Monday the 12th, right? And then all of a sudden, everyone was saying, Panjivas has been looted. So one of the greatest motivations, especially around in Mbali, was the looting of alcohol. And we know that alcohol is a social ill that is predominantly a challenge that is faced by young people. And now going back to the political leadership and no government leadership, the Minister of Defense was asked if is there a need to call for like a state of emergency or whatever it is, and she answered and was like, no, there's no need because they do not see no threat. And now, just this week, when the president spoke on Sunday, talking about that it looked like a coup and stuff and all of those things, it's like, where was that political leadership? Even the political parties only started saying no to looting after the looting had happened. I mean, Pietermaritzburg is burnt to the ground. If you walk down Church Street in Pietermaritzburg, all the shops there are non-functioning. ATMs were bombed. No bank is working in town. So you can only imagine, like for me, I think whatever happened in the last week was a political fight between those political leaders or political elite, and it had nothing to do with the people. And of course, everyone was motivated by the Free Jacob Zuma thing that actually started in the northern of KZN, because everything started especially for Pietermaritzburg and Durban, it started like around the 12th and stuff and everything. But like the week before, things were already happening in the northern parts of KZN, and it came to Pietermaritzburg and it was havoc the whole week. And of course, the LGBTIQ community is at the bottom of the chain. We face marginalization, and we face it systematically through a government not having inclusive policies that speak to the LGBTIQ community. And of course, even within our communities, we are marginalized, and within our homes, we are marginalized and discriminated. So we feel the burden much harder, if I would put it that way. Like, for instance, there is a friend of mine who has an organization, Ubumbano. She actually went around and looked for LGBTIQ persons who didn't have food, and actually put together food parcels for them so that they have something to eat. I myself am a first-year student. I get a 1,500 stipend, which I have to share with home because of course there's no one working at home, and I live with my cousins and stuff and all of those things. And of course that money wouldn't buy groceries that would last us for the whole month. So if like all of those issues and intersecting issues, of course, then I mean, with the whole situation that happened last week, it exacerbated the situation even like much more, if I may put it that way. That's all I just wanted to say. I hope I made sense, and thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, Bulelani. I see that what's his name now? Njavulu has commented on the chat, so I'm going to take the fact that we've run out of time and the fact that he dropped his hand to say that we will wrap it up. I think please have a look, if you're still online, have a look in the chat group. I was going to summarize. I think that the key points that I'm picking up, and obviously I'm not capturing everybody's point, right? Is clearly that there are some fundamental structural problems here, poverty and inequality in particular. There is the emerging issue of racism and possible tribal tension. I think Thuli in her note speaks about toxic patriotism. I think that's a very interesting way of describing it. It's something that speaks to the question, I think, that was asked by Fambai about particularly what impact this has had on people in the community who are not from South Africa. There's the question of leadership and accountability, political leadership and accountability, which is in disarray, and how we actually rebuild our capacity to hold our leaders accountable. And then we spoke about the social media platforms as a tool for both destruction and how we need to reclaim that, those tools as things that we can use, particularly in how we do our community organizing. And then the one other point, two other points. The one is, I think the point around food security and some of the contradictions that emerge, particularly when people say, we will defend our malls, we will defend our ShopRite. And some of those contradictions of who owns these things and how communities develop a consciousness and awareness of some of the contradictions inherent in those descriptions of things. I'm going to leave. David, I'm going to give you 2 minutes just because I think you led us into this conversation. I don't know if David's still with us. My screen's shrunk. If you just want to have maybe a concluding reflection, David, based on what you've heard and also some of the, just to wrap up what you had started us off with. And then I will conclude with a general statement, right? And then we'll close the meeting.
Sure. Thanks, Ashley. I think there's a lot of wisdom that has been shared already on the chat and comments that comrades were making. Clearly, I will, concur with the sentiments that have come strongly that we are living in a failed state. I think that's how Daniela has put it, and obviously Nobuhle in her rendition just echoed that sentiment, describing how things went down in Mbali. We are living in a failed state, and as activists, obviously, we cannot put down our guard. We are on our own. I think that needs to be clearly understood by all of us, that we are on our own as activists, and as activists who work with social movements who are constituted by grassroots formations and communities in big and small sizes. The idea that we are on our own is the ideal that will give, put a wheel or span on the wheel that we should stand up. We can't hand over. We should stand up and appreciate that we are on our own. Things that we expect from the state, if the state is what it looks like now, then we may as well just begin to be realistic and forget that there is anything coming. Looting, some people talk about, or highlight the fact that looting that we saw in the last 2 weeks is nothing compared to looting that was done and that is done by politicians and their business or elite cronies and internationally or local. What we saw last week is nothing. It's just not even a tip of the iceberg. It's nowhere near. Maybe it's a drop in the ocean. Yeah. It's painful what we saw last week. We cannot condone it. We cannot condone it because it's killing the very people who depends on these shops. But that being said, it's nothing compared to what we had, even testimonies from the Zondo Commission. Billions and billions, and no one is taken to jail for that. Those who took from these ShopRites, some have spent nights in jail already. So as activists, I think we have a challenge. The issue that you raised of political consciousness, I think again, is what will drive the ideal that we are on our own. If we are on our own, let's then get real about politicization of ourselves and the communities around us. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So in conclusion, I think we asked for your time until past and we're stealing a few extra minutes, but Ubumbano is a platform, it's a space. It's not, Ubumbano would not exist if it wasn't for the struggles of communities, right? If it wasn't for the activism of yourselves and organizations that you either are associated with or work for. And creating spaces for us to have these conversations is what we do. We also have a little bit of resources that we can use to support actions that seek to transform our situations, right? So, put in very simple terms, if you are moved to take up the challenges that have been presented here, and I think what David's saying, maybe I'm still an optimist. I don't know if we are completely entirely by ourselves. I think we still have allies in some places. But yes, government has certainly shown its inability to respond to the needs and to lead our communities. What are you doing in your organization? What are you doing that you can do? Right? So our analysis says we have a failed state, that we have no leadership. Can what I do today change that immediately? Or must I engage in a series of activities that build my community's awareness, social consciousness, ability to withstand onslaught from whoever tries to attack us, right? How do we, in our little space, in our space that we work in, try and contribute towards building a more resilient community, one that has a higher political consciousness and is able to resist when those anonymous voice notes are circulating that says, beware, all right? And is there anybody in this forum that you've connected with? I see already somebody was asking about Daniela's organization, We Will Speak Out, South Africa. Are there any other organizations that you might have identified from what people were saying, that if you connect with them, it might be something that actually can be good for the work that you are doing? In all of those things, you need to approach us. We can connect you if you can, right? So that's what we are here for. We're hoping that this isn't the end of the conversation, but that it will actually encourage you to find ways that you can carry on your activism. And if there's anything that Ubumbano can do to support it, you know, we're always willing to have a conversation about that. I'm going to end us there, 10 minutes over time, but thank you very much all for coming to this conversation. I think maybe we should reconvene again in a few weeks' time, when there's some distance from what has been happening, and we can just see what has happened. Have we been able to move forward as organizations and activists in addressing some of the challenges we've raised today? So on that note, Amandla, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And we hope that you stay well, stay safe, stay warm. It's cold outside.
It is very cold. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
Everyone.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye, Sister Me.
Amandla.
Amandla.
Awethu ngenkani.
Awethu ngenkani.
Awethu ngenkani.
Oh, Mr. Machiko.
He's gone. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to leave now.
Okay, I'll stop the